Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with Receivables Info. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. I think we've got a really interesting topic, and this topic came around because we've just been hearing so much about organizations or software just not being flexible in the receivables management industry, which causes some issues operationally and as an organization. So I really just wanted to thank everybody for coming out today, and we can talk a little bit. I want to run through some introductions here. We've got two really great presenters with us. We've got Kenny Baker, who comes from Latitude by Genesys, and also Gordon Beck, the CEO of Valor Intelligent Processing, who has been more on the operational side. And then obviously myself here to moderate, Adam Parks, wearing my hat as Receivables Info today. But as we kind of kick this off, I'd like to go through some kind of quick introductions. And for those of you that watch the Receivables Roundtables, I'm going to stick with my kind of standard format. Kenny, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Thanks, Adam, and thanks everybody for taking the time to join the podcast. We appreciate it. So I have been in the industry since the early 80s. Some things happened. I was going to college and decided one summer to take a break and got into the arms space. And I'm sitting here with 20 years of experience at the big call centers or the agency spaces. And then 20 years on top of that with working for Latitude by Genesys. So I've got 40 years of experience. And again, I think it's important to point out that I have, experience on the agency side and the call center side, as well as the software side. So it gives me a pretty broad perspective of what's going on in the industry and how things work.
Awesome. Just to give a little bit of background, can you tell everybody just a minute about what is Latitude by Genesys?
Sure. Latitude by Genesys was founded 1999. The philosophy from the guys that started the software was they always felt like their hands were tied behind their back when they wanted to do something inside of the platform, get some data, get a report, just whatever they wanted to do, almost period. It felt like they had to pick up the phone and call their vendor and say, this is what we need. And there's always going to be a cost associated with that. So the idea was to create a system that was open enough and flexible enough that it empowered the end user, kind of a teach a man to fish type philosophy. So that, it's a numbers game. Doing what agencies do, other than the laws and the regulations that they have to follow, I've always thought that everybody has their own secret sauce. So there can't be a software platform, or you can't be a software platform, I think, could be successful if you're pigeon-toeing or holding your customers to certain things or your beliefs. Like the platform should do this for compliance. It should do this for disputes. I think that all of that stuff, and this is what we do a very good job, we're configurable. And that's always a phrase that I associate with no money. When you start saying the word custom, it means dollars. But we still have that same philosophy of creating a platform that we don't want to be a PS company. We want to empower the end user to have the ability to get into the database, to be able to take the desktop, the UI, and do what they want with it. They can make it look like.
So you guys are an account management system of record with some flexibility, right? So you're kind of sit at the center, and we're going to talk about systems of record and where they fall into the overall collection operations here today. But just as we kind of roll through these intros, Gordon, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today, as if most don't already know?
Sure, yeah. Started in the industry as an agent when I was 19. I started a very small company here in Jacksonville, Florida, and stayed there for 21 years. And September 11th, 2018, and with my partners, we opened up VIP, Valor, and really kind of got into doing a lot more than I was used to. My background is telecom, third-party recovery for major cable, satellite, wireless providers. And that was the intention originally, but as a result of COVID, got into some BPO work that my parent company was fortunate enough to get during a very difficult time, and we were good at it. We ended up acquiring a company in Dallas, got into the recovering of tolling in that industry, and now we are a full-service call center company that can do anything from third-party and first-party collections all the way to sales and retention, tech support, tolling recovery. There's nothing we can't do. We have now we just opened our 4th shop in the last 3 years since we made our first phone calls, which was July of 19, and have close to 1,200 full-time employees, all brick and mortar, and are proud of what we have accomplished, especially the fact that 6 months after we opened, after spending a year getting licensed to get hit with COVID and being all brick and mortar, to do it in such a challenging time, we're very humbled and blessed to even still be here talking to you today, but we've gotten through it, and the future's very bright.
Agreed wholeheartedly. It sounds like you guys have come a long way since my last visit up there. For those of you that want to learn a little bit more about Valor Intelligent Processing and Gordon Beck, you can check out the Receivables Roundtable that we did together, or the interview that I did with him in his office up there in Jacksonville. So fun chatting with a couple of Florida guys today, since we're all down here in the wonderful sunny state of Florida. So as we go through our presentation today, I just want to let everybody know that I do also have the chat bot open here. So if anybody has questions as we're going through it or wants to make a comment, you can leave that in the chat, and I'll be responding to those as we continue to go through. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about as we talk about not being held, kind of hostage by a technology provider is, that this is an industry of relationships. Most of the business that we do is done because we have a personal relationship with somebody, and that's why we get the pricing that we get, or we're getting the features that we're getting, or whatever the case may be. So many different things in this industry are driven by the direct relationships, because people do business with the people that they like. I mean, I generally choose vendors and technology providers or service providers based on people I feel like I can mesh with, or they have a particular service or feature. So I wanted to start off this conversation by talking about how this industry is different, right? Like, this isn't standard enterprise sales, like you're working for a Salesforce.com or one of those types of organizations. The sales cycle in the collections industry is very, very different. Kenny is our kind of resident sales specialist here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how it really is different in more of a relationship driven business.
Well, I think culturally it's like a giant family, Adam. You go to these conferences for years and years and years, and you see the same people and you see friends. And so I think that part of it is huge. It's just the arm space, I think, is unique in that way. And it's one of the things I really enjoy about it is the people and the relationships. The sales cycle, sometimes long, sometimes short, but as you said, the choices are the important part. Being able to make a decision based on, like the relationships, the pricing that you get based on, like we have a ton of letter vendors. It's just the data providers. I think it's very, very important to be able to choose. I know back when I was running call centers, especially with data providers, I had situations where I felt like demographically, one vendor provided better information than another vendor. So I would send everything east of the Mississippi to somebody and somebody west of the Mississippi to somebody based on whatever my secret sauce was at the time, whether it be balance range, etc. So I think it's huge to be able to go to these conferences or just pick up the phone and call one of these many vendors and say, hey, what do you have to offer? And be able to have the ability to maybe have 2 or 3 data providers instead of just 1 or 2, maybe have 5, but it's all about the choice, right? And having the ability to make a choice and make a decision on your own, rather than somebody saying, here, you get to pick. We have 3 flavors, chocolate, vanilla, and chocolate and vanilla. I mean, it's kind of, Yeah.
No, I like your approach, Kenny. And that to me is one of those really important things. And Gordon, from your perspective, are you using multiple vendors for each one of your products, and how do you kind of feel about the industry of relationships that we live in?
Well, to start, I think to be great in this industry, you have to be different. To be great at anything, you have to be different. If it was easy, everybody would do the same thing and ultimately get the same results. From a security perspective, I think it's wise to have multiple vendors for certain things that we do. And from a relationship perspective, I mean, that's the foundation of the collection and credit risk business. There is not a vendor or a client that I've hired or been hired by that has not been introduced to me by somebody in my network that I've probably helped at one point in time or another. It is so important that when you have relationships, that it's a two-way street. We all look out for each other, and that's one thing that I love about this industry is that there's enough to go around. And if we all help each other, share best practices, are transparent with what's working for us, we can all be successful. But with that said, it is also a very competitive business, and you want to gain that edge. Having a multiple vendor setup, because one vendor offers something that another may not, and another may have strengths that another may not, it allows you to get the full ball of wax. It's all about the negotiation. It's what you can afford to do. But another great thing is that the vendors in our industry understand that margins are ultimately pretty tight. And when the margins are tight, you have to be able to be flexible to give your vendor the best chance to succeed. And that is, again, another great thing about our industry. Although there has been some and quite a few instances where vendors can kind of lock in their client, kind of handcuffing them, so to speak. There's just as many out there that get it and are willing to do their part without having to have it all. And that gives us a chance to all win.
It's almost too frequent that I hear from a client, from a consulting perspective, or one of my friends that they have been handcuffed and they'd really like to use this vendor, or they'd really like to try this product, or they'd really like to move into SMS, but they just don't have that capability because they are being handcuffed by an existing service provider. So, again, people do business with who they want to do business with, and there's a balance between the price and the service, right? Sometimes I'm willing to pay more for better service, or I'm willing to, for me, I like the flexibility, right? I use the technology that I use internally for my businesses is directly related to my ability to customize those things myself at my convenience and not be handcuffed to a third-party service provider. I truly believe that there's an importance to the vendor selection process. And when people are choosing, me for their marketing, or, you, Gordon, for your collection services, or Kenny, they're looking at your software, the flexibility in being able to make that decision and being able to have multiple vendors or kind of manage that process. So let's talk a little bit about what that value proposition actually looks like in terms of the importance of selecting the right vendors for yourself.
So to add on to Gordon's point about margins being so tight, this is hugely important to be able to have the choice, because with margins being so tight and the market share of business being awarded to the agency that maybe has 0.2% above the competitors, and that allows them the market share, whether that be, whatever that percentage of the distribution of business is, but 50%, 30%, whatever that is, that tight margin, it's imperative that you be able to go out and look at the options that the data providers have and what the letter vet, all of the choices out there, but mostly the data providers, I think, and the software platform, so that it's all flexible and it gives you the ability to execute whatever your work plan is or your work schema is for any one of your customers and how you treat them. It's very, very important.
So as we're going through this, we did just have a question that came up, and actually I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts from both of you. But the question was if we could speak to the differences between a data exchange and an integration. And I know from my perspective, there's been some instances where I'm being contracted by, let's say, a payment processor that maybe doesn't have a contract with a particular system of record, and they don't want to spend the ransom money ultimately that the software provider is looking for. And so how do we then integrate with those? Well, we can't do that direct API connection. We then have to find ways to do data exchanges. And I've actually built and own a lot of software that does that kind of stuff. But Kenny, from your perspective, can you talk a little bit about the difference between customers that are going to have to deal with a data exchange, let's call it FTP drops or something along that line, versus those that are capable of having the direct API interactions?
Yeah. So in my world, Adam, the integrations are things that I would consider to be pre-built and available. So your integrations with your vendor, whoever that software provider may be, would be all the pre-built integrations to all the data providers and the letter vendors and the payment providers. Those are integrations in my mind. The data exchange piece is more of something that relates to an ETL tool, either moving data in and out of more of an open type platform, something that's maybe SQL seems to be the industry standard, and something that's the easiest to move back and forth. So that's the difference in my mind. I think the integration piece becomes an additional integration is when your vendor, or let's say an agency, and you go to your software provider and you say, I've found this new data provider. I want to do business with them. I like what you have, and I do business with some of the people that you already have integrations with, but let's add this person. So again, it just adds another choice. It takes away the handcuffs, and it gives you, if your vendor's cooperating, they'll say, sure, let's make a deal with these people, and let's set it up so that you can get business from them. And then it's just another way if you think about it, it's another offering that your software provider has to give to the community of users that are on your platform.
So to me, I look at it and I think about the integrations being a cooperative, two cooperative platforms that are willing to pass data in, let's call it a real-time environment through a secure API and really simplify the process, versus these data exchanges that, generally happen when I'm being handcuffed, right? If I'm unable to pass the data through the preferred connection method being the integrations or the APIs, to me, that's really the key factor is
Agreed.
If I can't get an API, if I don't have cooperation and I'm being held hostage, well, then I'm going to work through a data exchange. Now, that's not to say that there's not data exchanges between clients and other things to where there's just going to be disparate systems. But I find the integrations to be more of a truly holistic solution, whereas the data exchanges are going to be a little bit different. Integration, I agree, Jeremy, that integration is also a standardization of a data exchange, but I think that it's the methodology in which those things happen. Is it happening through that secure platform connection? I think that when we go to the data exchange, we're finding a workaround to the alternative or preferred solution being an integration. Gordon, is this something that you have to deal with on your side of the world?
Of course. And what we look for is the opportunity with our software to give us the, kind of the keys to the car, and to give us the opportunity to employ people that can do these things on their own. And that is the where it kind of gets a little bit dangerous. When we talked about being handcuffed. Well, when you don't have the ability to do that, that means ultimately you're forced to pay whatever is asked of you to get it done by your vendor. And that is the true definition of being handcuffed in this business, is when you don't have a choice. Now, that doesn't mean you wouldn't still utilize your vendor, but them having the ability to provide the tools necessary for your internal teams that you're already paying salary for to get these things done is why that has to be a huge part of the decision-making process. To me, and I've been in this situation, it's a helpless feeling to be told that, we're going to have to do this for you. And, oh, by the way, it's going to cost $250,000. And that made me realize really fast that, picking the right vendor is, it's the difference between being a healthy company and being one that is excited to grow versus one that is afraid to board a new client because you're afraid how much it might cost and how long it might take to get your money back just for the integration. That's one example of many, but finding that right partner that it says, hey, we're happy to help you. We're here for you. But if you choose to do this on your own, here's the tool to do it, and we'll support you along the way. Nothing can replace that, especially when you're talking about a software platform or a system of record.
Well, I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more when it comes to, what kind of data is being housed, right? Because all of these software platforms are ultimately a database system with a graphic user interface that's overlaid on it, right? No matter what platform you're talking about, in the end, that's ultimately what software is, especially in our business. And so that separation between the database systems and using something that's a little bit more common to the industry. I know some organizations have started moving away from relational databases, which is pretty much what everybody knows, giant spreadsheets. And so I think it's interesting to find those types of changes. And I see, Mike Reinhardt here commenting that the integrations often allow for real-time data, whereas the data exchange may be a file that's imported over a period of time. And I agree with that, Mark. Yep. That is the biggest difference between kind of that real-time integration and being able to pass data faster and to manage things with less lag time versus kind of that different approach. One of the things is we're talking about the importance of selecting vendors. To me, it's all about the innovations that each organization is bringing to the table, and am I in a position to take advantage of those integrations and to be a first mover? Because eventually the whole industry starts to move in one direction once something is proven to be successful. But organizations like Gordon's that tend to be more first movers, get out there when something new is happening, test it, measure it, deploy it. To me, that's a competitive advantage for you, is it not?
Well, absolutely. And the last thing you want to hear is that, have that vendor call me and so I can figure something out with them. This business, first of all, you have to be willing to take risks. Second of all, you have to be willing to be the one that's not afraid to learn the hard lessons, getting out in front of that, not only from a competitive perspective, but from a financial perspective. Generally, the first one to dip their toe in the pool is going to get a little bit better of a deal. But they're also going to be the first one to production. They're going to be the first one to learn the lessons learned. And they're going to be generally the first ones that get it down pat and start utilizing that new technology or that new process to drive dollars and to build scorecards. So, I'm all when I hear something that sounds really good, and I've got the bandwidth within my team to get it implemented. Got to go for it, But none of that can happen unless your vendors and providers have, number one, the platform that can give you that kind of creativity and flexibility, but also the support. Without it costing an arm and a leg, because just as many good ideas as what I've used in my 25 years is probably double that was the bad ideas that didn't work out. So, all of the good ideas in the world would never financially make up for these bad ideas if I had to pay a ton of money to implement those bad ideas, if that makes sense. And it's not bad ideas. I should rephrase that. Just simple risks, there's no risk is a bad one until it's failed. Or it's just proven not to be effective. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to take the risks, then you have to be willing to look in the mirror and be okay with mediocrity.
Interesting perspective, and something I would expect from someone who has gone through so many changes, tried so many different things, and found success across, different application stacks or different process stacks as you've gone through it. And I had the pleasure of working with you early on in your business with CompliArm and getting compliance management together and all of that. And I got a firsthand opportunity to see how you evaluate and function. And speaking of the evaluations of software, Kenny, can you talk to me a little bit about the value of post-sale execution? It's all great when a salesman sells you something, but like, now what? I signed on the dotted line. I cut a check. What happens next?
Well, I think that again, it's all about the relationships, and prior to cutting the check, you should already know. I think all of the people inside of the organization that you're going to be dealing with. It's not when you move to a new software platform, it's not something that you're doing for a year or 2 years. It's a commitment. It's almost like a new family, because you're going to be on that. It's such a heavy lift, right? To go from one platform to another. It's getting better and better and smoother, obviously, but you're making a commitment. You're making a minimum 10-year commitment to go onto a platform. So I think it's very important post-sale. And it's hugely important that sales still stays in touch with you, that there's a CSM, somebody that checks in on you all the time, somebody from a services standpoint, that just the whole team, Adam, from the software provider, maintaining a relationship, just to say, hey, what's going on? The conference meetups, all that kind of stuff. It's just a huge commitment for anybody to.
As we were planning this webinar, one of the things that you had mentioned to me as we were kind of going through the preparations was that it is still about that freedom of choice, right? So if you in your post-sale execution, when you're starting to roll things out, you're starting to go through those integrations, as a customer, as somebody who's deploying software, you always want to make sure that you're maintaining some level of control there, because once you're locked in, and if you have no alternatives and you can't, you don't really have access to your own data, you can come across with some really interesting problems.
Yeah.
And so we're going to, Lex, I like where you're going in your comments here. We're going to jump into that here as we kind of roll into our next slides here. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the collection software being at the center of your entire operation. So of all the different things that we do in the debt collection industry, whether you're leveraging dialers, whether you've got manual dialing going on, anything and everything that you're doing, whether it be letter vendors, data vendors, whatever, is all ultimately coming through one platform. So that seems to be the center of this, the center of the wheel, right? The hub to all the spokes in the wheel that is your business. Gordon, could you touch on like just the level of importance that one particular system has across your organization?
Yes, I can. First of all, I can tell you that there's no doubt our system of record, and it's not a secret, it's one I've been a part of for many, many, many years. And, when I can tell you that it has undoubtedly driven a massive portion of our results financially and from a performance perspective, and I mean that wholeheartedly, it was obvious to me that it was designed for bill collectors, by bill collectors, with management in mind, ease of use, inventory management. That is on the ground zero level. The UI and how it functions and how it can be used financially. Training, it doesn't take a month, it takes a week, maybe even 2 days. It's that easy. The system of record in our business, I've heard a lot of people say, you've got the account, you can go from one account to the next, what else do you need, and have used that being obtuse to spending money to change. I adamantly disagree. When you have a supervisor, for example, that can pull up any amount of accounts in any category to put the right account in front of the right agent at the right time, to avoid fallout from credit card declines or hot accounts that don't get followed up on like that, and to be able to take that and slap it into a queue. I mean, just that little bitty thing right there is one of 100 things I can tell you that from a day-to-day make the platform directly responsible for results. It's not just a place to house data. It has to have the functionality to flow your day, to give you the flexibility to drop on the dime if that day is not going well, to give you the reporting, analytics, and backup to virtually show you, where your money is at and how to go get it. So to say that it is not the foundation of our success in the business would be just a huge understatement. It absolutely is. And unfortunately, there are companies right now that have had the same systems for 20 years. They're comfortable with it. They own it. But when it comes to technology, when it comes to ops, can never be competitive, simply because they just don't have the appropriate tools to do it. So, and I've learned the hard way that in opening, VIP, for example, that the grass is not greener. And at the end of the day, everything I've ever believed in, I proved to myself, from a real life experience. So that's so 100%, to answer your question, it's everything.
So we've got some interesting questions coming in here. So I'm gonna break from the presentation just for a minute because I think these are really great questions. Bill asked, how are collection systems moving to open source integration, or is it already being employed? And I think this is let me kick off the answer to this one, and then I want to get your thoughts on this. But from my perspective, what I'm seeing is a wave of people moving to platforms that have more customizable features by the user, meaning organizations are fed up with being held hostage and they're starting to move towards other types of platforms that give them more flexibility. So, in kind of following up on that question, he asked a little bit about, as a collection agency, my data warehouse for reporting was the most important tool that I utilized, but that was over 10 years ago. How has collection systems added warehouse reporting mining tools? And what I would say to that is, as long as you've got the underlying database there, I think a lot of the newer platforms are giving you the customization to build your own report. So to me, when I'm looking at software, I'm saying, how much can I customize the reporting on this platform so that I can leverage the data that I'm already warehousing there? Now, warehousing data becomes an even more interesting platform, because your data security insurance or your cybersecurity insurance is going through the roof based on the number of records that you're hosting in your platform. And so I think that there is a little bit of a balance there. But to me, it's about the underlying reporting capabilities, which is why I've always been a big proponent of leveraging SQL as a backbone. And I've built multiple software platforms for this industry, whether it be payment related, compliance related. I've never built a system of record because I partner with what I consider to be the best options out there. But having a relational database in the background enables you to customize that reporting and to draw conclusions, build dashboards, and do other things that allow you to keep your finger on the pulse of your overall organization. But some of this newer technology, like JSON string is probably going to be the wave of the future at some point, but I'm never going to find myself comfortable, at least not anytime soon, housing all of my data in giant strings that I can't pull apart the way that my mind is built to work. Yeah. I lived in relational databases and spreadsheets my entire career, and I can't imagine trying to break away from that, or the level of technology changes that would be required in order for me to hit that point in time. And I sure as hell don't want to be on any databases that were built in the 1970s and not really built to be a true relational database solution. I like SQL because it's easy for me to find Microsoft developers, and I don't want to be having to go and get my developers or those that are building my reports out of a nursing home. I want them to be fresh with fresh ideas, or to be able to leverage their experience. I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I do feel strongly about that particular subject. You guys have any thoughts on kind of the reporting piece?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a very, very data-rich industry. Being able to get into and mine through all of the information inside of your database that might be relative to finding the sweet spots for accounts that pay, and having just access to all the data in the database at your fingertips is hugely important, especially when you don't have to put it in front of somebody that has an IT background and you need some kind of degree to go in and get a report. You're looking for something that you can go in as a layperson, access every field in the database, and just dump it into like an ad hoc on the fly report and just real time put out a report with 100,000 accounts on it in less than 5 seconds. That's power. Because and what's the old thing? Information is power, and it still holds true. That's never going to change. But we are a data-rich industry, and having access to all that stuff and having it very quickly accessible, I think, is huge.
Well, Kenny, I think this also ties back to kind of the next bullet point we have here, which is about being a software provider versus being a professional services company, right? Yeah. And I think that when we look at systems of record, there's really two camps. There's one camp that wants to empower the user to be able to go in, get their own data, manage their own processes, bring in their own relatively available resources like SQL developers or data analytics professionals for that. And then you have some that want to be a professional services company, meaning that they want to hold the keys and they want to be the ones that manage that whole process. What's been your experience in dealing with organizations in the space under those two camps? And where do you fall is probably the best question.
So I guess the best way to answer this, Adam, is I would rather go to a conference and run into all of my customers telling me how successful they've been with their clients and how they appreciate being able to do things on their own than going into a conference and seeing a customer going, "You're killing me with your professional services costs." My
fair enough.
I mean, that's kind of it. It's give people the flexibility to do things the way that they want to do them. Let them fly.
I agree wholeheartedly, Gordon. I think you've shared your thoughts on this subject pretty well. So I'm going to jump to the next slide here and talk about kind of that migration process, because this is something that I'm starting to see more and more. And I can't tell you how many phone calls I've gotten so far in 2022 asking about what this process looks like. And I think that there's some myths around migrating collection platforms that we could probably dispel here fairly quickly. So, from your perspective, what does the migration process look like? And I feel like, Gordon, you've probably gone through migration at some point in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like?
Yeah, vastly different 2 decades apart. That's for sure. What was once a undertaking like nobody's business, I can't imagine how anybody would have picked a new software provider 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I remember distinctly that it was horrifying, number one. But, at the end of the day, it worked out, just took time. But based on the one that I did not long ago, I was astonished. In this day and age, and with the number of conversions that have been done, it was truly a piece of cake. So a lot of the speculation out there comes from people that might have done integrations or conversions years ago and think, oh my God, all this data. What if one thing is out of place? What's the domino effect? The beautiful thing is lessons learned. The companies that are good at this and have done this, they've learned so many things along the way. Number one, how to roll it back immediately, and then start over. But B, more importantly, what to look out for and what to tackle. That experience, and of course the technology, where you're putting it. A lot of people are going away from premise-based servers and are going to cloud-based environments and things of that nature. And but I can tell you, just from my firsthand experience, that a massive conversion took about at least 70% less time than I expected, and with about 99% less problems than I was looking to see. So it's much different now. So I think that many people that might have been worried about that one fact can kind of put that to rest now. Things have changed, and it's not as hard as it once was.
I love hearing that. And that's been my experience too. As a consultant, I often get hired to come in and assist with a software migration. And really the biggest problem that I have in the software migration process is not necessarily the new technology, the migration. It's being able to extract the data in a usable format from the existing system of record. Because if you've got a non-cooperative organization that is currently housing your data, they will just drag their feet, and then timelines change and resources are spent that don't need to be spent. And I think that becomes a little bit of a problem, especially if you don't have any leverage over that organization itself. And so just to tie in here, we had another question from Bill talking about developing a sophisticated warehouse with Latitude for a very particular firm, and how much they were spending on development resources a year. And Bill, to that comment, I would say things have changed dramatically, one, in terms of the cost of those developers, because I think when you are talking about a standard Microsoft certified SQL developer, something along those lines, or even the large network of partners that you find with some of these more flexible tools like Latitude, is the cost structure has been reduced over time because the availability of those resources has increased. So if we look at that strictly from a supply and demand, I think when we built that project for you back in the day, we didn't have the same number of SQL developers available to bring in, teach, and to actually execute upon that. So from my perspective, I think that those resources have become considerably easier to manage. Now, Kenny, from your perspective, what are you seeing as organizations are starting to go through that process?
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So I think it's very important that as you pick a new software provider, that as you move into migrating from one platform to another, there has to be a lot of homework done, because we're a complicated industry, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important that whoever you're dealing with has a process in place where before anything moves forward, that there's lots of conversations around how you do your business, and they just need to understand from soup to nuts what the project looks like, and that both of you, the software provider, as well as the agency or the creditor, that everything is in writing and everybody agrees what this whole process looks like. Because if you don't have that kind of upfront work and a mutual understanding of everything that needs to be done, so that when you turn the switch, it's been a successful project. I think that's one of the biggest things out there with making the move. And I also think that, when you look at some of the people that have been on their platform for a long, long time, bigger companies, they may have 10, 15, 20 people in their IT department. I think it's imperative to take a look at that too, from an ROI standpoint. If you can move on to a platform that takes that number down from, let's just say 10 to 4 or 5, you're almost looking at first year ROI when you make that switch from, just talking about things from a cost standpoint.
Well, if we want to start walking down the cloud versus premise path, that is something I've been passionate about for years. I have not built a premise-based solution in over 10 years. My focal point to this industry has been on that cloud migration. And I know we've only got a few minutes left here. We've got about 4 minutes. So, Gordon, as the operations guy on our webinar today, could you tell me, how do you feel about the cloud versus being on premise?
I feel from a security perspective much safer. Yeah, and that some people might think the opposite, but we have a world now where we're operating in a lot of cases, not me particularly, but many agencies in a remote environment, many agencies that have multiple call centers. Again, it's just dollars and cents, really. Ease of use is one thing, and not buying hardware is another. But when you're looking at a cloud environment, you're looking dead in the eyes of what the future is. I mean, premise-based systems in 10 years from now will not even be something people remember. So again, getting ahead of the curve, there's a reason for that. And again, it has so much to do with ease of use, expense, and of course, security.
True.
I'm a big fan of that. Kenny, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, when you talk to people out there that have been in this industry for a long time, there seems to still be a lot of hesitancy on some folks' part to move to the cloud. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't see it happening this year or next year, but I think to Gordon's point, 5-10 years from now, that's where I see it all. And it makes sense that for that progression to take place and for it to all be in the cloud. The security is a big part of it, because depending on who your clients are, they won't let you keep their information in the cloud. So that school of thought would have to change too. But I see that changing with time as well. So it's definitely the future, but the future's not next week or next year.
It's definitely something that I dealt with a lot with CompliArm, because we had compliance related data. We were tying back to systems of record through API connections, and there was all different kinds of things. So from my perspective, I think that it's almost impossible for us to meet FedRAMP standards with an on-premise server, which Jeremy Mapes is talking about in our chat right now. And I agree with that. I think it's hard to do a project that is in-house and managed, because you're never going to have the same level of resources that are available through a cloud service. And look, it could be Amazon, Google, Microsoft. I mean, there's so many different platforms out there. And it just depends on what language are you building in, what are you building, where is it hosted, who's going to use it, right? Where you're comfortable having your data centers. And with most of these cloud-based solutions now, you can choose to only have your data stored in the United States or in another country. It just depends. And then the obvious benefits of scalability when it comes to the cloud, because now you're able to ramp up and down and control your costs in a way that you just can't do with physical hardware. Plus, for those of us that are in South Florida, which is all three of us, I mean, there's a power outage, like every 20 minutes during the summer when we're getting our thunderstorms.
Yeah.
I don't want to have any data here. Like, we host hundreds of websites for this industry. The only computer I have in here is my PC. I'm not trying to host everybody's websites internally and deal with all the headaches and problems that come with a broken AC unit or losing power or whatever else the case may be. But I think you guys all kind of understand that. So with just kind of to wrap up here, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, first of all, thank you, Adam, for hosting and for having us today, and for the audience for joining. Always great to do these with you. Very informative, and I think that the moral of the story here is real simple. When you're choosing vendors or you're looking to make moves, the times are different now. You can trust that the process is not going to be as cumbersome. You have to obviously look at things like security and price, but make sure that you're reading what you sign and that you understand the agreements that you are in, and that the vendors that you select are going to give you the best opportunity to grow without nickel and diming you all the way to the top. The best system in the world is supposed to make you money, can actually cost you money if you don't have the freedom to do the things that you want to do from a technology and vendor perspective. So food for thought there. Again, personal experience and lots of hard lessons learned, but that's my 2 cents on the whole webinar today.
Kenny, any final thoughts from you?
It's been very interesting. Thank you. This is the first one of these that I've done. So thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's been great. And Gordon, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. So I just think that it's interesting right now how things are starting to change with some vendors making decisions for people rather than letting people make decisions for themselves. So that's it.
Well, gentlemen, I can tell you from my perspective, I'm a big proponent of not being held hostage by a technology provider. I think it's important that we maintain the ability to integrate and work with whatever vendors we want, whenever we want, because flexibility is key to success. And so for those of you that are watching, if you're currently being held hostage by your technology provider, especially an incredibly important one like your collection software, then I think you need to seriously consider taking a look at additional alternatives, because that is the center of your business, and you need to maintain control so that you can maintain your competitive advantages and continue to be different and special, and create separation between yourself and your competitors. So with those being kind of the final thoughts, I really appreciate everybody coming out and joining our webinar today. We'll be posting this to YouTube on Monday and look forward to additional feedback. Once it's posted, we'll be sharing it with everybody so that you can share this video with your friends that may be going through similar problems that you're facing right now if you're being held hostage by your technology providers. Thank you again, everybody, for participating. Kenny, Gordon, you guys are the best. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.